Aaron Lockett, former Kansas State wide receiver, joins us now. And Aaron, your erstwhile Wildcats had a rough start to the season. They got a nice win last week against UCF. What did you see in that game that was different than earlier in the year that gives you hope that this is turning back to where everybody thought they would be this year?
Avery running and Dylan playing.
Two pretty big factors that weren't there. Why do you think that Avery wasn't running? Was it scheme or was it Avery? Because at times it looked like he could have in games and then he just didn't.
You know, I always think it's different. If you look back a couple of years ago when Avery scored 5 touchdowns against Tech, nobody knew about him, right? And so he caught people off guard. And I think people have now schemed for him a little bit. No different than what they're doing in the pros with Lamar Jackson putting a spy on him. And so you got somebody chasing you down to the sideline every time you try to get there. So the running lanes are not quite as open as, the television may seem. On top of that, I think he's trusting his team a little bit, trying to be a playmaker, throwing the ball and letting his receivers and tight ends go out there and do the job. But, now I think he realizes there's still opportunities for him to go out there and make plays with his feet. And he's, it's up for him to make the right judgment. And I think he's doing a better job, right? I think it's easy for us to critique on the sidelines instead of in-game action. But obviously he's a threat with his feet and with his arm.
I mean, you had the perfect, succinct answer there is getting Avery running and Dylan Edwards back. So let's talk about the other side of that. Dylan Edwards comes back and, wow, look at this run game. Wow, it's all of a sudden looks pretty great, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think, the run game is important, right? If you can get 3 to 4 yards a pop, right, come second down, get another 3 to 4, you got 3rd and 2, right? You can hit the play action pass, tight end, you can go over top, you can get a little bit more aggressive. But when you start behind the chains and you get to 3rd and 11, it gets pretty difficult, right? They put a dime package in, you got 5 DBs, and you're throwing the ball. So obviously, first down, we got to continue to keep winning. Dylan's a big component of that. Even seeing him break the long one last game was really good to see that he's back, he's healthy, he's energized. And he still got that home run capability, which we knew he did, but it's always good to actually see it on display.
What have you seen from Baylor this week that you think they can exploit?
The biggest thing I think for Kansas State is we've got to get the passing game active, right? I think, Baylor's one of those teams where the talent is there, right? They recruit heavy in Texas, and whether they're playing to their top level or not, they've got the talent. And so planning as Baylor is one of those situations where if you can open up the pass game a little bit, right? Obviously, you think about Jason, you think about the tight ends that we use. We've got to be able to move the ball down the field. Those deep shots are important to us. I think it opens the game up. It keeps the defense respectable. But for the most part, I think we've got to attack them pretty early. I don't think we can play from behind with Baylor, just naturally. So I think we're going to have to come out aggressively and figure out a way to get a lead.
Yeah, it looks like Jace Brown and Jaron Bradley probable to play, which would be huge, obviously, for the Wildcats, especially in doing what you're talking about there. On the flip side, what's your confidence level in this defense going up against Sawyer Robertson, who I'm sure you've noticed is slinging it around pretty good right now on top of a lot of passing charts? What have you seen from the young man from Baylor and his targets, and what does Kansas State need to do to try to limit the damage as best they can?
Yeah, that's if we have a weaker spot, I would probably say right now that's, if you're just thinking about it, it's probably in the secondary, right? Just because of the amount of rotation of DBs we've put in there. Obviously, we've got some home run hitters at safety, right? Payne is a vet. He knows what he's doing, right? You've got Moss coming in. Quaid is doing well. But the corners, we've got to continue to shore up a little bit. And so I think that, we can get exposed. But hopefully we start to get the confidence. The talent is there, but you got to play consistently, especially when you start getting into Big 12 play. And I've just seen us have some issues here over the last couple of weeks, but I've also seen some good plays that give you a little bit of confidence. And so I know the coaching staff is doing everything they can to get those guys right. I'm rooting for them, but you got to show up on game day week in and week out.
The aftermath of the Ireland trip was rough.
Right.
The Avery Johnson and his family situation and kind of these bad looks around a program. Chris Kleiman is a guy who runs a tight ship. I mean, he's very much a player's coach, but he is also very aware of the look of the program, the perception of the program, and all of that. What do you think was the key to him of getting the locker room right in those coming weeks, especially when you took a couple losses that you didn't expect to take?
One thing I can say about Coach Kleinman, he sticks to the script, right? He doesn't veer very much, and he's had success, obviously, over the years doing that. Gene, the AD, is right there by his side, and so I think he just keeps plucking, right? The same thing. I think for you, what you just said is right, getting the locker room right. It starts at the top down, especially with Avery. I think Avery is very vocal. I think he shows by example. Like I said, I think getting some of these guys back on the field was helpful. But for the most part, the Iowa State game was a rough game, right? Take away being at Ireland, just playing Iowa State in general, regardless of playing in Manhattan or in Ames, Iowa State is just one of those teams that's going to always give you a tough game. And it was tough to play them out the gate, right? And so you take that into consideration. Very physical team, very cerebral team. And they just did an excellent job. Rocco's been there for a little bit and made things happen. So, yeah, the aftermath was pretty rough. We played the Arizona game. Quarterback was very fleet-footed, gave us a lot of problems. They got rolling, rushed the ball really well. We've got to show up the run defense a little bit better as well. I just think overall defensively, right, if we can control field position, not have the defense out there as much, I think we've got a chance to be competitive in every game, right? But it also goes the other way, right? If you don't control the ball and you get behind the sticks and you lose field position, we can have a rough stretch.
You kind of touched on what I was going to ask you there. What do you think the ceiling still is for this team? Because it felt like after the first 3 weeks, like, let's bury them. And then they win last week, and it's like, they're unburied. They're great again. Right. And I know it's somewhere probably in the middle, Aaron, and tomorrow will dictate a lot of the feelings on the other side of it. But do you feel like this is a team that's got it in them to go and make a run and make it interesting trying to get to Arlington? Or are you a little bit more optimistic? Kind of where do you find yourself?
I think we're middle of the pack. Right. I think the talent is there, but we're going to have to see who really wants it. Like, that's about as honest as I can be. Right. I want them to be near the top. But then I see some of these other teams play and we're not there yet. Right. Can we get there? Of course. But as you just mentioned, come Saturday is going to be a big test for us. Right. As a team. And so as long as we go out there and do what we're supposed to do, I think we'll be competitive. I think we can come out with a victory, and then hopefully that can snowball into, hey, guys, let's really get this rolling, right? But at the end of the day, when you look at the record, right, we're not on the winning side of things right now. So, it's nice to be optimistic, but you also got to be realistic.
One of the weird things that happened that first week, obviously Dylan Edwards gets hurt on the very first time he's in the game. Right. And then this controversy comes about that he, quit on the team and took himself out of the game. And then, of course, he didn't play for nearly a month. I mean, he was out. And so he was either having to go method actor into that role and really sell it, or he actually was hurt, which he was. Now he's back and playing and healthy. What did you make of that as someone who, obviously you played in a little different era where every little thing couldn't be scrutinized like that, but someone who probably did have to deal with some criticism after a bad game or a bad moment like that. How did you make of how the coaching staff and Dylan dealt with that now that he's back healthy?
There's more lens and visibility to everything now, right? And so it's hard to figure out exactly what's going on, right? I think we all saw the end result, right? He wasn't active, wasn't playing, and so everybody came up with their own thoughts and decisions, right? Me personally, because I know Dylan's dad, and I know kind of how what cloth they're cut from. I know that he probably was injured, right? Just based off of that and how his dad is and how the family is. Like, they're football people, right? And so I know that if he wants to be out there, he'll be out there. I also know he wants to show up 100% when he's out there, right? And so, whether he was getting healthy to get back to 100% or making sure that it was the right time, the timing was excellent for last week. And I think for his first debut, to fully be out there for a full game, he showcased what he can do and the talent that we knew that he always had coming out of Derby and going to Colorado and coming back to K-State. And so now it's about consistency and just doing that week in and week out. And I think if he can do anything to the level of what he did last week consistently, I think you're going to see a different Kansas State team going towards the rest of the year.
Yeah, and if anybody's watched that Auburn game, then they know that there's some yards to be had if Avery wants to go grab some yards out there. Aaron, I looked at your career, and I believe you played Baylor twice, freshman and sophomore years. Your freshman year, it was in Waco at Floyd Casey Stadium. You guys won 49-6. That's back when Baylor was not very good, but you guys crushed them. You had 7 for 157 and a score. Yeah. So you remember. So you do remember. I was just going to ask if you had any, and the next year you had like 3 for 37 or something like that. But do you have any recollections of just that performance? You had a bunch of other 100-yard games in that same time span, but anything stand out to you from playing the Bears?
I remember that they played cover 3, which basically is, you've got quarters and you've got a deep safety and you got a safety that comes in and takes the flats. And for us, we would just run Justin Swift across the middle to take that top safety off, and the backside would run a post. And I scored on that play. And I think we ran that play 2 or 3 times, right? And so they just kept jumping on Swift, and I would just keep going deep. And so I remember that game vividly because it was my freshman year, first time in Waco. And yeah, that was in my stretch where I had like 3 or 4 100-yard games back to back to back. And so for me, Zach Bronson we played together in San Francisco later on, and Zach had just left Baylor at that time at point. So every time I see Zach, I would tell him, Baylor's trash. I would just tell him left and right, trash. And he was like, we're not that bad. But now one of my good friends and ex-teammates is Kevin Curtis. And I played with Aaron Hunt, who's now the GM at Baylor, and Kevin's the DB coach. And so obviously has some love for Baylor. Just based off of that. And so I watched those guys play and see how they do. And so excited to see just the game itself. Like I said, I'm a fan of football. So I like to see good football across the board. But obviously want the Wildcats to come out on top, but it's going to be a very competitive game.
In the scope of the Big 12, is it Texas Tech and everybody else right now, in your opinion? Or is somebody else like Iowa State?
Are we talking about NIL? Or are we talking about athletes?
We're talking about who's gonna win the league. Yeah.
You know what I would say? Tech is definitely up there. You know who's really good? Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Cincinnati's sneaky good. What their quarterback did last week against KU was pretty incredible. Right. And so, because KU put a performance on, and as good as KU is, I was impressed what Cincinnati did. I think Cincinnati is going to sneak up on a lot of people. Right. Just across the board there. Obviously, Tech is there. I never count out the Iowa States of the world. I just don't. Right. Yeah. They just find a way to get on a run. Whoever can get on a 4 or 5 game run here in the conference, I think has a strong chance to take it over. Conference play is different than non-conference play, as you guys know. And so I think we'll see a lot of upsets that we didn't expect as teams start to play.
Yeah, that Cincy-Iowa State game tomorrow is going to be big time. In Cincinnati, they're favored. Iowa State's got their top 2 corners out. Their kickers are out. So, yeah, that could be really, really interesting there.
Yeah.
You ever play a game when your kickers are out?
Martin Gramatica was never out. Jamie Ream was never out. My guys were always in. They just kicked extra points for us, though.
Yeah, I played high school football against the Gramaticas in Southwest Florida.
Okay.
Yeah. He and his brothers went to LaBelle. I went to Bishop Rowe. That was our rival school.
Okay.
We hated the Gramaticas. I'll tell you, and you know this, like when you play high school football and somebody kicks like a 38-yard field goal, you're like, whoa,
yeah.
Like this guy's unbelievable. They're lining up from 45 and 50 in games, and you're like, whatever. And then it's just, I played against Bill, which was the younger one. And he, holy cow, like it was ridiculous.
So it was Martin Santiago, and then Martin, is it Martin's son now?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That just kicked the game winner about a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. They just look, God put the Gramaticas on earth to kick and make more kickers. That's what he did. Yep. So if I'm a coach, I'm finding the Gramaticas and just saying like, when's the next one coming?
Yeah, let's go.
We're going to do that. Absolutely. Aaron Lockett, former Kansas State wide receiver. Aaron, thank you so much. Can't wait to talk to you again.
Appreciate the invite. You guys take care.
Yeah. Aaron Lockett, former Kansas State wide receiver.